You're listening to the Sportsman's Nation Podcast Network, brought to you by Savage Arms, specifically the new shotgun from Savage called the Renegade. Now, the Renegade is a badass shotgun, and it has a dual regulating inline valve gas system. The patented self-regulating gas system allows high power and low power loads to cycle with the same consistency. This means 3-inch magnums down to lower recoil 2 3/4 cartridges. If you want to find out more information about the Savage Renegade, visit savagearms.com.
My name is Clay Newcomb, and I'm the host of the Bear Hunting Magazine podcast. I'll also be your host into the world of hunting the icon of North American wilderness, the bear. We'll talk about tactics, gear, conservation, but we'll also bring you into some of the wildest country on the planet chasing bear. On this podcast, we talk about part 2 of the book, The North American Model of Wildlife Conservation.
The Linchpin of Relevance.
Yeah, I think this is a good podcast. Like, we kind of got about halfway through the book last time in episode 77, 2 episodes ago. Mm-hmm. And this time we kind of cover the second half. So I think people will enjoy the conversation. I had River Newcomb, Kolby the Bear Tech Moorhead with me.
Yep.
So, man, this stuff is just so important that we know it. Mm-hmm. And, you know, this is just like a little cheat sheet that you can listen to and hopefully pick up a few things that you'll remember.
Yeah.
Okay. Hey, spring bear season is going on, man.
Yeah.
Guys are posting pictures of bears that they're killing.
Yeah.
You know, we talk about how the seasons are disrupted right now, but there's lots of spring seasons going on.
Yeah.
In Idaho, residents can hunt. You know, lots of places people are hunting.
Season to be flexible.
That's right. And so if you're hunting, check out, if you're baiting bears, it makes no sense for you not to be using some Northwoods Bear products.
It smells great.
Some commercial scent.
Yeah.
So check out northwoodsbearproducts.net.
Mm-hmm.
Look at, if you're a houndsman, we have a lot of houndsmen that listen to this podcast. Hey, we ask you to be loyal to the people that are being loyal to us. If you enjoy this podcast, the guys at DU, Buddy Woodbury, good guy. Hey, I want to make an announcement about DU. They're starting a podcast.
True story.
Buddy Woodbury and the guys at W Hunting Supply are starting a podcast.
Episode 1's available now.
Episode 1's available now. And it's an all-hound podcast. You know, our good friends at Houndsman XP have an all-hound podcast.
Yep.
You hear us talk about them, and we'll continue to talk about them. Now our buddies at W have an all-hound podcast as well.
Yep.
And so you can check those guys out. And lastly, our friends at the Western Bear Foundation. They got a name drop inside of this podcast, didn't they, Kolby?
They did.
As being a nonprofit hunting conservation organization doing good things for wildlife. They are they're a membership-driven organization. And I hate to even tell people this, but it's true. If you're a member of their organization, you get Bear Hunting Magazine, man.
It's true.
It's a win-win for everybody.
Yeah.
So, hey, the May-June issue of Bear Hunting Magazine is it's probably going to be in the mail by the time this podcast is sent out.
It's hot in the press right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good issue. Oh, man, I love the cover.
Yeah, cool
I can't
image.
wait for somebody to say something about the cover.
Yeah.
It's a non-traditional cover.
Yeah. Yeah,
I mean,
for a magazine.
I'd say so.
Yeah.
It's not a bear.
No.
There is a bear in it, though.
There is.
But you'll never guess how the bear is displayed in such an artistic way. Yeah. So it's a really good issue. Just excited about people getting it. And hey, subscribe to our magazine, Bear Hunting Magazine. $25 a year. You can get 6 issues, $45 for 2 years, or 3 years for $60. Which anything I do, I look for the longest possible way that I can not be harassed by them trying to get me back.
Yeah.
Like, really, like if there was a 5-year membership to some organization that I like, I'd just be like, yeah, I'll do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you should do that with us.
I'm for it.
So, on to the podcast.
On the podcast.
The date is April the 21st, 2020. And we're at the global headquarters of Barony Magazine. Hey, just today on my Facebook feed, I had a memory pop up. And it was a memory that 2 years ago in 2018, I killed a turkey on public land in Arkansas using Izzy.
Yeah.
My mule.
Yeah.
Do you remember those pictures,
Wait,
Trevor?
how many years ago?
Just 2 years ago. And that hunt was a super cool hunt because I went into some pretty deep backcountry for here in Arkansas on the mule. I left the truck at daylight, basically, and rode the mule back into this area. And the whole time I was owl hooting when it was appropriate, early in the morning, owl hooting. And then once it got like past fly down time and like an hour into daylight, I would just cut and cackle and call. We're using a diaphragm off the mule all the way back into where I was wanting to go. Mm-hmm. When I got back into about where I was wanting to go, I had a trail camera that I had left through the winter. And so, it was April 21st, first time I'd been up there. And I checked the trail camera. I had a little card reader deal. And the camera died around April the 1st, but there was a long beard in front of that camera on March the 20th. Mm-hmm. Well, I just kept going back in and got to about where I thought turkeys might be, tied up the mule, had yet to hear a gobble. I hadn't heard a gobbler. Tied up the mule, walked 150 yards. The first time I called, turkey gobbles. I go into high speed, move forward about 40 yards, sit down, call one more time. He's closer. 2 minutes later, kill a gobbler. Walk back to the mule. First time the mule has ever seen a gobbler. And I was still training the mule, conditioning the mule to haul game and stuff. She hadn't hauled a bear by that time. She hadn't hauled a deer. Mm-hmm. So I didn't know how she was going to act with a turkey. Anything unusual with an equine animal has the potential to flip them out. Anything. Yep. I mean, you can walk up with a Walmart sack in your hand or a bag of Oreos, which I've never done. Presumably anything can flip them out. Well, I walk up with this big old gobbler, which to a mule would be a big stinky critter. Mm-hmm. And Izzy just never batted an eye. And I had about a 18-inch piece of paracord that I cut off, and I tied and made a loop between the spur, underneath, above the spur. I tied it, made a loop, tied it on the other spur, threw it over that saddle horn, had a celebratory cup of Jetboil coffee.
And a fist pump.
And a private fist pump, and a prayer of thanksgiving, and headed off the mountain. Wow. Happy as I could be. There is killing a gobbler on a beautiful spring morning. Yeah. There is not a substitution for the feeling that gives me. Like I could kill a Boone and Crockett buck. I could kill a brown bear. Mm-hmm. And it would not be the same. I'm not saying it would be worse or better. Yeah. I'm just saying it would not be the same. There is a spot inside the human soul that is designed to kill turkeys on beautiful spring mornings with no wind. Yeah. If there's wind, it messes it all up.
Just feels right.
And if they don't gobble, it messes it all up. That's why you don't want to just kill a turkey. You want to kill a gobbling turkey. There's a difference. Big difference. And I rarely feel as accomplished as when I kill a turkey.
Resonates in the soul.
It does.
Yeah.
And I've decided it lasts about 48 hours.
48 hours.
It lasts about 48 hours.
I like it.
And then it still holds its value, kind of like a Toyota Tacoma. Holds its value after it comes off the lot, but you want to go back and get another one. Mm. Yep. So, and because our populations are down so far in Arkansas, Kolby, you kind of have to milk that success for a longer period of time. Yeah. Because I didn't kill a turkey last year in Arkansas. Yeah. This year, I think our hunt was even harder than ever. It was later. It was shorter. And so bear, which one of the last podcast, maybe we talked about my son, Bear Newcomb, killing a gobbler.
Yep.
And I am milking that for all it's worth. 3 days after Bear killed the gobbler, Bear Newcomb, and I went back into national forest and over 2 days hiked and rode 14 miles and did not hear a single gobble. Good weather too. Pretty good weather. Never even saw as much as a track or in pretty good turkey country. You know, historically good turkey country. And so, River, good afternoon. I got distracted by the date. Okay, it's April 21st.
21st.
So 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So I've got with me River Newcomb. Say hi, River.
Hi.
River's my 16-year-old daughter. She's world famous for falling off a mule and then killing a big old Pope and Young 19-inch plus Arkansas bear. I've got Kolby Moorhead.
Yep.
Who's world famous for falling off a mule too. I forgot both of you guys fell off a mule.
Spring Bear, Montana, 2019.
And you also killed a big bear in Manitoba 2 years ago.
Yeah, 2 years ago in August.
It probably wasn't as big as River's bear, but it was okay. No, its body was.
Its body, yeah.
But the skull, high 18s, we said.
Well, I think it was just over 19.
Was it really?
We didn't know how close it would be once it dried.
Well, that'd be about the same because River's was just over 19.
Yeah.
So anyway, these are my people here that are on the podcast. So what we're going to do today is we're going to continue on with our basically a book review. So 2 podcasts ago, we started kind of just a conversation around this book by Valerius Geist and Shane Mahoney about the North American model of wildlife conservation.
Yep.
Before we get into that, though, I want to kind of give a bear status update of what's happening with the spring bear seasons.
Yep.
I mean, you could not have predicted. I mean, if you would have said, Clay, if you would have had the brightest thinkers in the world that knew hunting, that knew politics, that knew law, and said, what would happen that would cancel spring bear seasons in Canada?
Not a thing in the world.
I mean,
extinction.
Yeah. There are no bears left.
Yeah.
No, you couldn't have predicted what would happen. I wrote an editorial for the May-June issue of Bear Hunting Magazine, which we went to print last week. Kolby, you didn't even see the editorial because I wrote it like the day we went to print.
Yeah.
And I said that in a time of global crisis, literally the things that can be shaken will be shaken.
Yeah.
And so what we need to do is focus on the things that can't be shaken.
Yeah.
And spring bear hunting can be shaken.
Yeah, turns out.
And spring bear hunting is really important to me, but it's not the most important thing. And now is the time to. It's really an amazing time for families to focus on relationship. Mm-hmm. I mean, we may never have another time in our life when we're all together this much. Yep. Inside individual families and homes, and so the time can be really valuable and used for growth and development inside of a family, or it could be detrimental. Yeah. I mean, and I think as fathers and mothers, like we have the option to of how we script what this is going to look like inside of our homes. But I think it's a good time to work on stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, like my wife and I are working on stuff inside of our marriage. Mm-hmm. And we're because when you're around each other, you're seeing things. You need to communicate more. You need to move away from self-preference and move away to preference of the whole, what's best for the family. Mm-hmm. So there's some work going on relationally, but we're also having a great time. We're spending a lot of time together. So this coronavirus, COVID-19, has had significant impact on families. And for the relevance of this podcast, we're going to talk about what it's done for bear hunting.
Yeah.
Because currently the Canadian border is shut down, except for essential traffic. River, do you know what that means?
Like the people that have to work.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Seems like bear hunting should be essential.
Yeah, that's essential. It? Yeah, for yeah.
Yeah, what if I rolled up there and I was just like, hey, I publish Bear Hunting Magazine.
Yeah.
I got to go to Canada.
Yeah.
They'd let me through.
Probably.
Do y'all remember that one border guard that me and Brent Reeves talked about when we smuggled that watermelon into Canada?
Yes. Wait, the one...
He wouldn't have let us through.
He was...
Because you'd had fireworks?
Well, that's what he asked. He was like, what kind of fireworks you got? I was like, what? I said, firearms? What kind of fireworks do you have? I don't have any fireworks, man. Anyway, he wouldn't have let us through.
Yeah.
But essential travel. Okay, so let's just give a quick rundown. And this may not be the totality of it, but this is pretty close. There are 9 states in the U.S. that allow spring bear hunting, okay? In the lower 9 states.
Mm-hmm.
And then almost all the Canadian provinces except for like Nova Scotia and some of the higher Canadian provinces like Nunavut. And so essentially all the Canadian provinces have a spring bear season.
Mm-hmm.
Currently in the U.S., Washington State has totally shut down their bear hunt for the year.
Yeah.
Okay, so you can't hunt in Washington. Oregon, the bear season is open, as I understand it. Montana came out about 2 weeks ago, and they closed down non-resident bear hunters coming into the state.
Yeah.
Which that directly has affected us because we're planning a trip to Montana this year. So, but on the 24th of April, which is just a few days from now, they are going to decide what they're going to do.
Yeah.
There's speculation that they're going to open it up to non-residents because Montana has hardly been hit by the coronavirus. They have very few
population,
small population, so it's not spread. It's been one of the states that hadn't been hit very hard, so they're trying to kind of open back up the borders. They did say they sent out a bulletin to people that basically said they're considering, what did they say? Well, it was essentially like they're considering opening up the borders, and if it wasn't work-related, you had to quarantine for 14 days if you'd been out of state. It was, they're giving some instruction, okay?
Yeah.
Wyoming bear season is open. Arizona bear season is open. The Idaho bear season is closed to non-residents. Residents can hunt, just like in Montana. Residents can bear hunt.
Yeah.
They've closed down the sale of non-resident tags in Idaho with no prescription. No future casting that they're going to open it up this year.
Yeah.
Which really hurt a lot of people that were going to go up there.
Yeah.
Many of the so let's talk. Okay, so let's move from the U.S. into Canada. Most Canadian bear outfitters have canceled their hunts for this spring.
Yeah.
We wrote a story in the May-June issue of Bear Hunting Magazine where we talked about the economic impacts to bear hunting outfitters in Canada. We have a lot of great relationships with bear outfitters in Canada.
For sure.
That's what we've kind of built a lot of what we do for our people that get our magazine is hooking them up with Canadian bear outfitters, the right ones. We wrote this article, and I want to kind of give a picture because maybe somebody booked a Canadian bear hunt, and then the outfitter is like, well, we're not going to do it, and you've already given them a non-refundable deposit.
Yeah.
And maybe there's some question about how this should be handled. Well, in this article, we basically encourage people to just be patient and let the outfitter have some time to figure out what they're going to do when they've now lost basically potentially half of a year's income.
Yeah.
And the way that these outfitters work, especially baited bear hunts in Canada, is that you give the outfitter a deposit.
Yeah.
And then they buy supplies for their camp and bait for that spring hunt long in advance. I mean, they would have done that back in January, February for sure, March. And so potentially the money that you gave them has already been spent on the hunt you were potentially supposed to come on.
Yeah.
So a lot of times maybe that money is not there for them to give back.
Yeah.
And as much as people may think that bear outfitters are rich, they're not.
No.
I mean, I described it to somebody today that didn't know the hunting world. And I said, the people that we work with that are these bear outfitters, man, they're just good, hardworking people that are wanting to make a living being their own boss and essentially living off the land.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not doing it to get rich.
Yeah.
There are some outfitters in different places that probably money is a big motivation, but not somebody that's making their living off black bear hunts.
No.
And so what we encourage people to do in this article is just be patient. And Jill Paradis, Riverside Lodge, one of our good outfitters in our magazine from Manitoba, he was quoted in the article, and he said, if you have booked with a reputable outfitter, you have nothing to worry about because they are going to make it right. Now, it may be next year. Mm-hmm. They're going to have to do some finagling, but just be patient.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we've got to do all the way around in a time of crisis, even from just a standpoint of just, nobody wants to be out money, and, it's kind of a hard deal.
Yeah.
But my encouragement to you, if you have booked a hunt, is just be patient, and you'll get your hunt.
Yeah.
And so that's good stuff. River, what do you think? No, River doesn't want to talk. She's shaking her. You got no comments on the Canadian Bear Outfitters? You've never been to Canada.
I've never been to Canada. I want to go there for my senior trip, though.
Oh, really?
And go on a bear hunt.
What kind of bear hunt you want to do?
A brown bear hunt. But I said that to you once, and you said...
Wait a minute. You can't hunt brown bears in Canada.
I meant Alaska.
You want to do she wants to do a brown bear hunt in Alaska for her senior trip.
Yeah. Not Canada.
Okay.
But
big dreams.
This next
big dreams. You know how much that costs?
Yeah. That's the one that... Okay, I wanted to go to Alaska to do a brown bear hunt, and then you said that I would probably rather go to Canada. That's why I got it mixed up. So I do want to go to Canada and do the black bear hunt.
Yeah, That'd be awesome. Kolby, your thoughts?
Yeah. No, I mean, dealing with some of these guys up in Canada, they're just really good people, really easy to work with, and they never try to get anything over on you. Like, just really, really solid individuals, at least the ones that I've dealt with.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I definitely have more of a thing. It's like, well, if I can help, I'm okay with you,
Yeah.
Like, I wouldn't have a problem with them keeping the deposit just because of, like, knowing them and knowing, like, just how they are,
Yeah.
And, I mean, it's expensive to bait and run as many different baits as they do, and, all the equipment they have to use to get in and out. And so there's all of that is just like overhead, and it's like that money isn't part of their profit. It's part of your experience,
Yeah.
And so I think just realizing that those funds are really just basically setting up a foundation for you to have a enjoyable time, and not them, taking that for themselves,
right?
And having that understanding,
right,
really, really helps.
Yep. Well, that's good. That's good stuff to think about, and let us move on to the second part of the book review, North American Model of Wildlife Conservation. So as we stated before, this book came out, I think, at the first of the year.
Okay.
So the copyright date in the first few pages of the book says 2019. So I think it was probably actually published in fall of 2019, late winter 2019.
Yeah.
But it really just started to get into people's hands at the first of this year. So what we said was that we're trying, as a hunting community, we're trying to establish our relevance in modern times. That's what I think that we're trying to do. And if you're not trying to do that, you should be. There's this phrase, this pop culture word that's used to describe the way a person's worldview. Okay, and that pop culture word is 4 letters long, and it's woke. Okay.
Okay.
I think that a hunter, someone who is a hunter that is thinking just beyond, the primitive nature of potentially just somebody that doesn't care, that just wants to go shoot something. Like, I'm not talking about that guy, but the guy that's woke just a little bit.
Yeah.
That appreciates hunting, that appreciates wildlife, that appreciates and understands the privilege that we have as Americans to do what we do. Bizarre. It's a bizarre human experiment to do what we're doing. And it's worked with like massively flying colors in the last 130 years that we've allowed the citizenry of these United States to have access to public lands and private lands to kill wildlife and take it into private possession, because that would be so bizarre from what we came from. So, the foundation of the current American governmental system and our people was that we came from other places and that people were persecuted. And so they left persecution, they left tyranny. They came to America looking for freedom. And so over where a lot of people would have come from, the founders of this country, wildlife was owned by the noblemen at different times. We said, kind of reviewing, okay? Yeah. Wildlife was owned by the king. Literally, the king of England owned wildlife. And then sometime in the 1500s, there was an act made where they said, oh, okay, the king doesn't own it all, but the landowners own the wildlife that's on their land. And who were the landowners of the time?
The
rich folk.
Noblemen.
So essentially, the peasants, the common man, was taken out of the hunting equation, and the king actually used that law to disarm the citizenry of Europe. Of the United Kingdom, of England, at one time, because I don't have a lot of detail on that, but they used that to be like, hey, you can't hunt, so you can't have guns. Yeah. We also talked about, okay, so that's where we came from. So this whole idea of the citizenry owning wildlife is a bizarre experiment. I mean, because think about it. If you said, we are going to try something new on this massive continent to save wildlife, and here's the idea. We're not going to cinch it down to just where the elite few get to hunt. That would seem to be the safe call for those in power. Yeah. But guys like Teddy Roosevelt and the founders of the ideology of the North American model of wildlife conservation said, you know what? For this to work long term, people need to have vested interest inside this. People need to receive benefit when this thing succeeds. People need to have a reason to want to preserve wildlife. And inside of that reason, there would be culture built where we report poachers, where we don't want overharvest of this year because we're already thinking about next year. Yeah. And so it was this essentially bizarre experiment where they said, you know what? We're going to let the common guy, anybody that is free from a criminal record and has access to a weapon to hunt, which in this country, that's been one of the founding principles of this country, Second Amendment, our ability to hold and bear arms, which the North American model hinges upon the common man having guns. That's incredible. So it's not just, we talk about the Second Amendment and stuff, and there's lots of different narratives inside of that, but I think it's pretty cool that one of the narratives is that the Second Amendment is a big part of the success of wildlife in this country, which is counterintuitive. You would think if you give every hillbilly and redneck a gun, that they would kill everything. But they don't, because the culture has been built in such a way that, there are poachers, there are people that break the law, but they are a lot less than they used to be, I believe. I think our culture is less tolerant of thieves and robbers. And our law enforcement is better. Just things are better. Okay, so that's the That's where we started. Okay, River Newcomb. This is what I want you to know. Okay. We talked last podcast about how River is pretty vocal at school, and she kind of likes to have a reason for why she does what she does, and that's good.
Yeah.
What we didn't get into last time, which is essential, in the last podcast was called the Linchpin of Relevance.
Yeah.
And to me, one of the linchpins of relevance that every hunter has to know, and this isn't new. There's, Brunella's talked a lot about this. There's hunting collectives talked a lot about that. I mean, a lot of bigger podcasts have talked about the Pittman-Robertson Act.
Yeah.
But for our people, we're going to talk about it again, because the Pittman-Robertson Act is one of the most influential pieces of legislation that makes us relevant. I mean, it is the thing that makes us relevant.
Yeah.
And there's just a handful of things that really make hunting relevant in modern times, and this is one of them. And so the Pittman-Robertson Act is technically that's kind of like the colloquial name, like the common usage name.
Yeah.
But it's actually called the Federal Aid and Wildlife Restoration Act. What's it called, River?
The Federal Aid and Wildlife Restoration Act.
That's right. Do you know when it was signed into law and which president did it? Colby, do you?
Man, I always want to guess Roosevelt.
Yeah, I would guess Theodore Roosevelt.
You're wrong, but you're right.
Yeah.
Because it was Roosevelt, but it wasn't Theodore. It was Shucks. The other Roosevelt.
Franklin
Delano. That's right. Good job, River. Yeah, it was Franklin Delano Roosevelt in 1937.
Okay.
Okay, so by the 1930s is essentially when the North American model was in full bore, widespread usage. Okay.
Yeah.
In the last podcast, we talked about what the North American model is and the 7 sisters of conservation. Mm-hmm. Okay. And I may go back and review those. But so by the 1930s, pretty much all those things were They were enacted.
Yeah.
And so the Federal Aid and Wildlife Restoration Act was signed into law by President Franklin D. Roosevelt on September 2nd, 1937. Okay, River? Long time before I was born, long time before Kolby was born. Pawpaw Newcomb was born in 1948, Gary Newcomb. So just give you a little, 11 years before Pawpaw was born.
Dang.
But listen, this is what the Pittman-Robertson Act is funded through an 11% federal user pay fee or excise tax. That's a good thing to know. A user pay fee is an excise tax. You might hear someone say excise tax. Well, I didn't know what that meant.
Yeah.
It's a user pay. It means so the people that are participating in that sport are the ones that are taxed. Mm-hmm. So an excise tax doesn't mean that bread at the grocery store, the tax you pay on that does not go to this.
Yeah.
So if you never hunt, if you never buy firearms, if we're going to look at what actually pays it, like you don't pay into this.
Yeah.
So this is a user pay excise tax on these things. And this is important. You need to know this. Mm-hmm. Sporting arms. That means firearms. Mm-hmm. Archery equipment.
Yep.
And ammunition. Mm-hmm. And it's a 10% tax on handguns. Okay. So there's a differentiation. So there's an 11% tax on sporting arms, archery equipment, and ammunition. So broadheads, bows, arrows, fletchings, anything that has to do with archery is taxed at 11% rate above the standard tax. And that money is collected by the federal government and goes into a big fund. Okay, it's collected by the U.S. Department of Treasury, and these funds are apportioned each year as grants to the states and territories by the U.S. Department of Interior, and based on a formula set forth in the Act, okay? And so basically what it boils down to is that the physical size of your state and the number of licensed hunters is how the formula works for how much money that you get from Robertson Pittman, okay? Mm-hmm. But therein, there's another critical piece of it is that basically the federal government through this pays 75%, and the states pay 25%. So basically, if the state of Arkansas got $75,000 in Pittman Robertson money,
that is put 25 up.
They would have to pay 25,000 from wherever, whether they got it from license sales or whether they got it from however they got it. Does that make sense? So they're trying to make the states have a stake in what they're doing too, because we all know that sometimes government money, it's just, if it's free money, it's sometimes used in inefficient ways. So basically, it's putting some responsibility on the state. It's like, if you're going to use this money for this, then you got to put some in there too.
Yeah.
So here is the next question: is what is it used for? Do you know, Kolby? I know. See, that's we know and see, I can't say that I knew this that well. But it's like, what's it used for? So it's one thing to say we fund conservation.
Yeah. For some reason, I don't think it's all like wildlife related things. I want to say it's even like other projects, like for parks and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like recreational things, not solely wildlife.
Gun ranges is what you're thinking of.
Gun ranges. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a specific allotment of Pittman Robertson money that goes to public gun ranges.
Okay.
But let's see.
We need one of those around here.
Yeah, we do. We do, and we don't have one.
Yeah.
Okay. Of the funding available to the states, more than 60% is used to buy, develop, and maintain wildlife management areas.
Okay.
Over 4 million acres have been purchased outright since the program began. So 4 million acres have been purchased outright. Nearly 40 million acres are managed for wildlife under agreements with other landowners. So Pittman Robertson money goes to fund wildlife management areas and to acquire habitat. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna flip over to another section of the book right here, where, there's a place in here where it talks about exactly what. It's kind of spread out, but Pittman Robertson money is used for
wildlife management areas,
buying land, academic research.
Okay.
That's a big one.
Yeah.
Because the linchpin of this model is that scientific based data, research data is used. And so like Mike Chamberlain, the turkey doc that's been on Ranella's podcast and Land and Legacy.
Yeah.
He said that a lot of his turkey research in the Southeast has been funded by Pittman Robertson money.
Okay.
So they fund research projects. So they fund, and the way that works, River Newcomb, is that like if you went to school to University of Arkansas and decided to get your master's in biology or your PhD in biology, you might say, hey, I want to study turkeys in Arkansas. And you would submit a proposal, and they would have to pay you and pay for your research, and it would cost a lot of money.
Yeah.
And so that Pittman Robertson money would go to fund that.
Yeah.
Okay. And so it also an allotment of the money goes towards hunter recruitment as well. Hunter recruitment programs.
Yeah.
So like Arkansas Game and Fish Commission can like say, hey, we're getting $3 million from the federal government. We're going to put in $1 million. We're going to use some of that money for boat ramps and wildlife management areas. And we're going to use some of it for building some outreach programs to recruit new hunters. That may be advertising. That may be, building online programs for kids or something, whatever. And then they may say, and we're going to buy, there's 350 acres that's privately owned in the middle of this wildlife management area. We're going to buy that. They may say, we're going to clean up this gun range. We're going to buy a new gun range. There's a lot of different stuff. That's what Pittman Robertson does.
Yeah.
I want to say that there's another place in this book where it talks about how much actual land has been purchased from Pittman Robertson. And it's a massive amount of land.
Yeah.
So this money is essential. And if we're talking about relevance of modern hunting, it's a user pay fee. I mean, hunters and firearms users are paying for this. Hikers, bird watchers, bicyclers, they do not pay into this.
Yeah.
I mean, and so it's like, some people could, the devil's advocate could be like, well, just because you pay for it doesn't mean that you're the only ones that gets a say in a democratic society.
Yeah.
But it's a hard thing to argue against. It's like, well, we're the ones paying for it. We've been the ones paying for it since 1937.
Yeah.
And that is good. That's really good. It's really good stuff. But okay, River Newcomb, how much money does Pittman Robertson fund? Here's another question. We're going to look at, there's this one section in the book where it talks about how much money hunters contribute annually to conservation.
Yeah.
And it breaks it down into 3 categories, okay? The first one is actual Pittman Robertson money. Okay, listen to this. And this is just statistics from 1 year, 2016, would have been 4 years ago. In 2016, $695 million was apportioned to state wildlife agencies in the United States from the excise tax collected on hunting and shooting purchases, which is the Federal Wildlife and Restoration
That was the
Funds.
payout, like how much went to the states?
Yep, $695 million.
Okay.
$695 million. So that went to all 50 states, presumably.
Mm-hmm.
So, you can do the math. Let's do the math here. Like, what's 695 divided by 50? That's like 12. Get your calculator. Get your calculator
out.
Yeah.
I don't.
Let's just get a general idea of like if it was apportioned equally out to the states.
13.9
million each.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's good. Okay. But we know not everybody's equal because there's little states.
Rhode Island's out.
Rhode Island ain't getting much PR money. But like the state of Texas is massive and has tons of hunters.
Yeah.
Michigan, Wisconsin have tons of hunters.
Mm-hmm.
Arkansas is a average sized state, but I mean, we don't have a lot of people here. Montana's a huge state, but not a lot of people. So all these things factor in.
I would think the West would be higher just from the amount of tags sold, because I would imagine it would take into account non-resident license sales too.
Yep, it would. Because it's license sales. So, okay, well, that's just a good idea. So, but, potentially like if it were, so presumably some are getting a lot more than 13 million.
Yeah.
And some are getting less than that, obviously. Okay, so that's one thing, Pittman Robertson money. And again, we're talking about hunters contributing financially to conservation, which we know that everything in this world that works, unfortunately, revolves around the almighty dollar. Mm-hmm. So and they talk about that in this book. Part of the reason the North American model of wildlife conservation has been so successful is because it's worked economically.
Yeah.
It's provided jobs for people. The hunting industry is huge.
Yeah.
There's benefits to it that go beyond just the individual being able to go hunt and procure wild protein.
Yeah.
There's people that make a living from hunting. Mm-hmm. There's, manufacturers of products, outfitters, all these positive things, but also the actual funding of, maintenance of these areas and research and all this stuff. So, but the second thing is the sale of hunting and fishing, the sale of hunting licenses. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. River, take a guess. How much money annually? Just take a guess. It comes from, she's shaking her head and her eyebrows are furrowed. How much money do you think comes from the sale of hunting and fishing licenses in this country? I'll give you. Do you have your phone? You don't even have your calculator.
No, because
you could do a quick guesstimate. You could say, well, I could tell you there's like 100-something thousand licensed hunters in Arkansas. They pay $25 a year. So there's a couple million, and this is just one state, and there's 50, so you could multiply that times 2. Okay, but you won't do that. Kolby, what's your guess?
Oh, let's say 70 million.
Okay. Try 600 million.
Yeah, I knew it was going to be way
It's
off.
okay. It's okay. I wouldn't have known where to guess.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have had a clue. So again, let's $695 million from Pittman Robertson excise tax, $600 million from the sale of hunting licenses.
Yeah.
From all the states.
Yeah.
Okay. And then there's another massive contribution. Hold on just a second. Okay, yeah. There's another massive contribution amount that comes from private donations from hunters for conservation efforts, which would come through organizations like Wild Sheep Foundation, Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, National Wild Turkey Federation. Yeah. We're going to throw in our buddies at the Western Bear Foundation, Ducks Unlimited. Yeah. So, River, there's these massive, they call them NGOs, non-government organizations. So they don't work for the government. They're nonprofit 501c3s, which means they raise money, but they're not really designed to
profit,
increase personal wealth for any one person. And so these organizations are very well run, very well funded, and do some incredible work. And, okay, how much do you think that they – just guess. It's like, River, you can just guess. Kolby, guess first. Hey, whatever he guesses, guess what he says times 2. Kolby, what's your guess? How much private donations?
150 million.
Okay, River, please multiply that times 2.
Oh, gosh. 350 million. That's not even that. Oh, gosh.
She said 2.5.
The correct answer is 300 million.
So I was closer than him?
Well, if you would have done what I said, you'd have been exactly right.
I was close to what you said.
Yeah, I was amazed at that number.
Yeah.
300 million.
Wow.
In private donations. So that means what? Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation. And so, they're taking small donations from people through membership funds and different things, but there's also some big players in conservation. I mean, the wealth of this country is pretty much unprecedented. Yeah. I don't really understand big money, but there are people that have big money. Yeah. And they need tax write-offs. And I mean, some of them may be totally, their donations are truly because they care about wildlife, which I mean, I'm sure a lot of them are. But I mean, like these groups are getting big money from some individuals that are, and man, I'm glad they are. Yeah. So that combines. So there's 3 things: Pittman Robertson, hunting and fishing licenses, and then private donations by hunters account for about 1.6 billion with a B dollars every year for conservation, which goes towards all kind of stuff. I mean, everything. So, like license fees and stuff, like that would go to just fund your state's general wildlife management organization stuff. I mean, like Arkansas Game and Fish Commission, they've got biologists, they've got field technicians, they've got private lands biologists that will come out to your land and walk your land with you and give you recommendations. They've got game wardens that patrol and are making sure people are obeying the laws. They've got wildlife management areas that need gates put up. They need like fisheries, they're stocking fish. They're moving around turkeys at different times. They're doing research. They're doing den studies for bear. They're, I mean, like all that stuff is primarily funded through the sale of hunting and fishing licenses. Yeah. And
seems like they have a surplus.
What do you mean?
They probably have more in the fund than they're actually like using with the states.
Well, describe what you mean by that.
That the amount contributed is more than what is going out to like states and projects potentially.
Are you saying they have more money than they need?
Well, just that's been like requested maybe.
Yeah.
So
I don't know, because what I hear is a lot of these organizations are really pinched.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, because it was like, what, $695 million that went out to states for Pittman Robertson. And it's like, was the rest of that $1.6 annual billion, at least in 2016, it's like, how's that get spread out? It's probably not in the book. It's just,
yeah. Well, I mean, I think we can say the hunting license part of it, which is $600 million, is going to just fund state stuff. I mean, you see a game and fish truck driving down the road.
Oh, okay.
That
so
money
that wasn't
bought that.
So that wasn't like part that's coming out into Pittman Robertson, like not like every license has a little bit that goes to the Pittman Robertson.
No. Because Pittman Robertson is free money that you get from the government.
Yeah.
That's ear tagged for certain projects.
Gotcha.
Are you with me?
Yeah. Well, I just thought like with firearms and stuff, I always thought like firearms, archery, and all of that. And then when you said licenses, I was like, oh, well.
There's three different categories.
Okay.
Pittman Robertson money, license money, private donation money, which,
Gotcha.
like the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission wouldn't be getting money from, well, they probably do get some money for or work with Ducks Unlimited or Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation.
Not
for
wild
elk.
sheep.
But, I mean, it's not like they're writing checks to Game and Fish to buy gas for biologists in Arkansas.
Okay.
But the guy for buying gas for biologists comes from that hunting license money.
Yeah. I had a little bit of a disconnect there.
There you go. Okay, good. Well, that's good to get clarity on it. So that's all. I think every hunter ought to know that. I think everybody ought to be able to have some understanding of how that works.
Yeah.
So that you could have an intelligent conversation with people,
Yeah.
and just so you could appreciate. I mean, like, we just take stuff for granted. I mean, I do.
Yeah.
You just take it for granted that there's biologists. You take it for granted that there are people that have the best interests of wildlife working in your state that are trying to, I mean, in general, wildlife agencies are not trying to strangle out the sportsman because they make a living off the sportsman.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they are sportsmen.
Yeah.
And so in general, these, it just helps to know what's going on.
Yeah, just that passion for wildlife. It's kind of the underlying thing.
Right. Let's see. Okay, here's an interesting statistic. Recent estimates indicate that about 70% of the users in these areas, and it's talking about just public lands in the United States, let's say, 70% of these users of these areas do not hunt. And in some properties, and percentages may be as high as 95%. Despite the funding source, conflicts sometimes arise when non-consumptive users express concerns about seeing hunters using areas. Oh, the irony. The irony. Do you get that, River?
Mm-hmm.
So it'd be like us being out in the national forest turkey hunting and hikers seeing us in camouflage carrying guns and being like, not liking that.
Yeah.
And then the irony of that. And see, that's where as hunters, there's a lot of things going on there. We do have to be worried about public perception, but we also have a PR issue, public relations issue, where if this were widespread and saturated throughout the culture, like if we knew this, like we know a whole lot of other stuff in our culture, people would see a hunter and they would go, "Oh, thank you."
Yeah.
A hiker would walk by a hunter and say, "Thank you for buying that gun and those shells and that camouflage and that turkey call, because you are paying for the maintenance of this forest."
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the truth.
Yeah.
And not the, that's, I mean, like the Forest Service isn't fully funded by Robertson Pittman Act. That's not what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
'Cause that's not true, because, that non-consumptive user is, if it's national forest, is paying something into national forest. But for wildlife related stuff, that is funded by hunters. Mm-hmm. And then some wildlife management areas that are specifically wildlife management areas, like owned by Arkansas Game and Fish Commission, or owned by your state, those are fully funded by the dollars of hunters. Yeah. Okay. So the irony of it, the irony. Let me see. Where are we going now? So I'm just kind of perusing through this book, trying to find different things that are of interest. I keep going back to this idea of self-interest playing a massive role. Let's see. Do I want to read that or not? I think I'm going to. One of the greatest achievements and surprising aspects of the early North American conservation movement was the recognition that self-interest must play a role in any long-term effective strategy. The North American model, as it emerged, clearly represented a strong practical approach that returned something of direct value to the citizenry of the day. It was in this frame of reference that hunting, defined as fair chase, recreational pursuit, which was in contradiction with market killing, became the cornerstone of the North American approach to wildlife protection and enhancement. Yeah. So this idea that the self-interest of wildlife being owned by the citizenry is the crux, is the focal point of this model, is that's pretty amazing stuff. So the final chapter in this book is called Social, Economic, and Ecological Challenges to the North American Model of Wildlife Conservation. Okay. So the model worked so wonderfully in the 1900s. It truly did. You know, we talked about in the last podcast about how one of the critical components of this model is that the general citizenry understood and approved of hunting as a way to gather meat, essentially. Like that, because if that wasn't mainstream, then the model would collapse. Yeah. Like if there came a time when only 20% of the people thought hunting was okay to hunt, it was okay to hunt for meat, and 80% didn't, the model would collapse. Yeah. Well, the 19th century, not the 1900s, were ripe for that. I mean, hunting participation was at its peak in the 1980s, when I want to say there were like 16 million hunters, licensed hunters in America. Yeah. But our population at the time was like 230 million people. So that was a fairly high percentage of hunters. Yeah. Today, I think there are 11 million licensed hunters in the United States. That may not seem like that big a deal. It's like, well, there's only 5 million less. But the population of the United States has increased by 100 million. Yeah. So we're now like 4.5% of the population. Yeah. So it's pretty significant numbers. And so one of the things that this book talks about is that in modern times, which, I mean, we live in such a radically different world because of, and it's a lot of because of the internet, it's because of globalization, it's a lot of different things. But they said, what are the challenges to the model? And they actually made a list. And here are 7 challenges to the model. We're not going to talk about all of these. We're just going to talk about a few of them. Gotcha. But I think that's what we've got to think about as hunters. It's like, what are we going to do different if we want this thing to persist? Yeah. And ultimately, if you want something to persist beyond your life, you have to assign it some type of like sacred value. I mean, because like I could just say, I mean, like I'm middle-aged. I'll probably be able to hunt for the rest of my life, presuming that I live into my 80s. I mean, like there would be some form of hunting, like if even if this thing starts to go south. But
you still go fishing.
Yeah. Yeah. But that can't be good enough. No. Like hunting has shaped my life in such a way that essentially for me to think about my progeny, my sons and daughters and their kids and their kids and their kids. Yeah. It disturbs me to think that there could be Newcombs on the earth 100 years from now that couldn't go in the mountains of Arkansas and hunt a bear. Yeah. That is essentially enough disturbance inside of me to say, I want this thing to persist. And so we have to find ways to make it persist. But the difference is that the world's radically different than when this model was at its peak of success. Okay? So now we're seeing all these challenges to the model, and here they are. And that's what this book is, the best book and the only dedicated literature to the North American model of wildlife conservation. And if you haven't listened to the first one, you got to go back and listen to the podcast called The Linchpin of Relevance. Yeah. I don't remember which episode it was, 2 episodes ago.
77? Maybe
77. Okay, number 1, challenges to the model. Increasing human population. Let's see, 82% of the people in North America live in urban areas.
Okay.
That means 18% of people live in rural areas. By 2050, 82% live in cities in North America. A half to 3/4 of the globe are urban. In the worldwide, the United Nations projects that 68% of the global population will live in cities by 2015, an increase of 13% over the current statistic, whereas 82% of North Americans already live in urban areas. Mm-hmm. So this is globally. That's an interesting statistic because North America is more urban than most of the world.
Yeah.
So that's saying that a lot of the world still lives in rural areas and presumably are still connected to wild places. The global population is projected to surge to 8.5 billion by 2030. So, I mean, the planet is just getting filled up with people.
Yeah.
People need space. Mm-hmm. People need places to build houses.
Yeah.
I see that even in rural Arkansas. Mm-hmm. In the 1830s, Frederick Gerstacker, the explorer, the hunter that came over from Germany, that I love his book. Mm-hmm. If he came over to this place that had just become a state and was just this wild place.
Yeah.
And if you would have told him, hey, 100 years from now, 100 further than that, 170 years from now, this place is going to be so full of people that you will not be able to get away from people. Mm-hmm. It would have been. He probably would have cringed. Mm-hmm. But I think about it in the economics of even the way, and it probably is this way everywhere. But like people buy chunks of land and intentionally fragment it, intentionally block it. They'll buy a 60-acre tract of land, and they'll split it into 6 10-acre tracts and sell that. People will buy those 10-acre tracts, put in water, put in septic, build a cabin, and all of a sudden you've got 6 different owners on a 60-acre tract of land.
Yeah.
That doesn't seem that detrimental to wildlife, but when you start actually adding up the amount of forest that's being pushed over, gravel roads that are being put in, the disturbance and fragmentation, it starts to add up ecologically, that's number one, increasing human population. Number 2 is globalization. This is a threat to the model. Globalization would just mean that essentially, as I understand it, that we're just becoming like one big nation. I mean, like throughout the 1900s, communication would have been so limited that you could have pretty much like run your own country and your business was kind of your business in a sense. That's not true, but in a sense. Today, with urbanization, I've got people that don't speak English that are commenting and tormenting the Bear Hunting Magazine YouTube channel because that YouTube video is all over the world. And we've had people from hundreds of countries, or over 100.
That don't use letters.
Yeah, they use different characters than the English characters.
Yeah.
Commenting on our bear hunting stuff, globalization. Like, so people could look at some person doing something and think that is barbaric. They don't understand the culture. And we do it with other people too, though.
Yeah.
I mean, we can't just say they're just doing it to us, because we do it to other people as well in other cultures that we see that we never would have had sight into. And we say, that's crazy. Well, I mean, there's some things that are crazy, but I always say it like this, is that hunting is very complex and it is not understood at a glance. And it takes an intelligent look to understand that the killing of something is actually a massive contribution and a scheme to save it.
Yeah.
It's an odd-shaped pill, but sometimes the truth is hard to swallow. So, somebody sees a hunter kill a bear on YouTube that's in some other place. They don't have bears in that place. They live in massive cities in that place. They think that hunter just killed the last bear on the planet.
Yeah.
They don't understand that black bears are thriving. They don't understand that the color-faced bear that I killed was a black bear and not a grizzly bear. They don't understand that Pittman Robertson money that I paid taxes on when I bought that archery equipment is going to buy wildlife habitat for that bear. They just don't understand.
Yeah.
Globalization.
Yeah.
So again, people's perception is really critical. So approval is critical for this model to work. So if the globe is becoming smaller and there's people that don't understand and don't approve, then that hurts the model. Okay. Number 3, urbanization and the human nature divide, which urbanization is just what we talked about, that all these people live in cities. The human nature divide is where he goes into this book and says that like 50% of Americans do not know basic science.
Okay.
Like, for instance, the example he used was that antibiotics don't fight viruses. Like, he said most people don't know basic science, like how long, what's the pattern of the sun as the earth rotates around the sun, like how long is it, like what is it basically a year? A calendar year is essentially the earth traveling around the sun.
Yeah.
Like, people don't know that basic science.
Interesting.
And this model is based on science.
Yeah.
And so his point was that if people don't know science, then true science is irrelevant to them.
Yeah.
Because, science and data and research is only valid if you understand it and you are like, yeah, I salute science. Science is right.
Yeah.
What I think and my perception is probably wrong. And so basically he's saying people don't know science.
Yeah. You need a foundation.
So that would be the human nature divide.
Yeah.
Urbanization means people are further away from their food, further away from animal death, further away from really what happens in order to feed humans. All right. Number 3, lack of connectivity or fragmentation. That goes back to most wildlife populations need, best case scenario, need unfragmented habitats.
Yeah.
So fragmented habitats could be as simple as, like here in Arkansas, we have 2 what we call allopatric populations of bears in the Ouachitas and Ozarks. Allopatric means a isolated population. Essentially, Interstate 40, River, if you drove from Fort Smith to Little Rock, Interstate 40 is a 2-lane highway divided with a median. And bears essentially don't cross that. And the Arkansas River and Interstate 540 divide the bear populations in Arkansas.
Okay.
And that potentially has has biological impact on genetics, has biological impact in a lot of different ways for these populations to be able to expand and spread. Fragmentation. That's big time with, I read a study the other day about bobwhite quail, that paved roads actually affect bobwhite quail distribution and breeding and different things. You wouldn't think it. You think, a quail can run right across the asphalt.
Yeah.
It could fly right across it. Well, fragmentation, it messes them up. Like, these animals have grown up for a gazillion years inside of an environment that was wild. And just in the last 100 years, paved roads have been instituted. Bridges, fields where there weren't fields before. And so they've never had to deal with an asphalt road. Fragmentation. Do you understand? Do you understand, River? Okay. Number 6, and then there's only 2 more, guys.
Oh, okay.
This is like a big lecture. I love it. This is great. Thank you, guys.
I like it. Let's do it.
Thank you. This is my class. You, River, are my pupil. Okay. Funding, fragility, and resilience. Okay, that's that goes into just the idea of the funding. We talked about all this funding, but there's massive issues with funding.
Yeah.
Arkansas Game and Fish Commission's license sales went down by 20% this year.
Really?
That's what I heard.
Oh, wow.
It may have been 18, it may have been 22, but in that ballpark.
Yeah. Huh.
So, like, all this money that we're talking about that's paying the fuel bills for biologists driving down the road to come to your property.
Yeah.
Like, they were making, if they're making 100,000, they're making 80 now. Not the biologists, but just,
the state.
20% less.
Wow.
That's massive. The Pittman Robertson is fueled by user pay stuff.
Yeah.
So if the archery industry decreases because people don't hunt or people are distracted with whatever is going on in life and they be like, I'm not going to hunt this year. They're not contributing. I thought about this year. I didn't buy a single turkey call this year.
Yeah.
I'm 40 years old. I think I've bought a turkey call every year of my life since I was about 16.
Yeah.
I've gone to Walmart or gone to the sporting goods store and bought a turkey call, multiple turkey calls.
Yeah.
Well, this year, because of this COVID-19 stuff, I didn't. I just pulled the old call that I found out and worked around on it a little bit. A diaphragm call is what I use. And I was like, well, that's okay. And then River wanted a call. And what did? We cleaned up one of mine real good, and I gave it to you. I usually would have just bought you one because it's, kind of gross. Yeah.
How'd it sound, though?
Hey, River has turned into a good turkey caller.
Really?
I told River Newcomb, I said, hey, if you want to be a turkey hunter and legit, you got to learn how to use a diaphragm. And she's learning. So there would be taxes that would be on that turkey call, hunting equipment.
Yeah.
That I didn't contribute this year because of this COVID-19. We know there's all kind of financial implications, but so the funding is in jeopardy. And that's why, 16 million hunters in the 1980s, now down to 11.5 million hunters.
Yeah.
Those are the people that are paying for this. And so there's massive potential issues with funding. And so that's why hunter recruitment is so massive. And we could do a whole podcast about hunter recruitment, and maybe we will.
Yeah.
But, man, the math is simple. If everybody that gives a darn about hunting would just try to replicate themselves by one or two, recruit one or two people, encourage people to buy a hunting license. This year there were several people that I encouraged to buy a hunting license, and they did, and they didn't even hunt that much.
Yeah.
But I told them, I said, you have contributed as much to conservation this year as I have because you bought that $25 license. And, they went hunting one or two times. And I was like cheering them on. Good. You contributed to conservation. You have no idea what you just did, but it was significant.
Yeah.
If everybody was really an evangelist for what we're doing, because, if there's 11.5 million of us, and let's just even say let's say 20% of those 11.5 million are woke. And we could all replicate ourselves, take someone new, encourage a buddy that hadn't hunted in a few years to buy his license and go with you. Bam, you bump that number up a couple of million, which is notable. So the solutions to this are, to getting humans to act and do stuff that is outside of their self-interest is the climax of leadership and the most difficult thing in the world. Getting people to do stuff that's not just in direct benefit to them. So, some people might think, well, you hunting is not a direct benefit to me. They don't have interest in getting other people interested in hunting. I do a lot of hunting that's solo hunting. I can't take you. I don't want to take you. But there are some things I do that I do want to take you. Yeah. I'm pointing at Kolby, but I'm not talking about Kolby. I'm mainly talking about you. There's some things I want you on, some things I don't. But, so all of us have, we do have personal priorities inside of hunting that, it's okay to have that. Yeah. But there are probably places where you could give a little. And that's got to be grafted into our culture. Big time. Yeah. Big time, big time. So we all have to move beyond ourself if we want this thing to persist. If you want your progeny to be able to be shifted and shaped by the wild places that have shifted and shaped and made you and given you joy and given you health through organic, beautiful, tasty protein. If you want those same wild places that have challenged you and made you into what you are, which if hunting is a part of your life, I think in some way it probably has done that. The last one, number 7, is labeled abundance and superabundance. And I'm going to have to be honest about that. while there are many instances of wildlife depopulation in the wake of human development, some species of native wildlife thrive in human-impacted landscapes across North America. White-tailed deer, elk, snow geese, Canadian geese, raccoons, beavers, even black bears. Black bears are often highly abundant in such areas. It's true. I've said it so many times. Whatever's happening ecologically in North America has been beneficial to black bears and all these other things. But some abundant or superabundant species, especially herbivores, cause ecological damage, therefore threatening other species of flora and fauna. So, because of the changing ecosystem, and herein lies one of the challenges of the North American model. So we just listed out the seven challenges. Yeah. One of them is superabundance of snow geese, white-tailed deer. We got 25 million white-tailed deer in the country. Those are it's a challenge to manage those, and you could go on. But hey, one of the last things, declining population. Today, less than 5% of Americans hunt. It's a big deal. And let's see. Yeah, in Texas, treeing a squirrel. But no, hey, I encourage everybody to get this book in their hands and read it. Like I said, it's not. To me, it was fun, and to a lot of people, it would be a fun read, but it's an academic read. I mean, it's not made to be. It's not full of hunting stories and stuff. Yeah. But that's what I like. It's kind of like reading a textbook. Very well written, very to the point, full of facts and figures. I mean, but again, I think this is the linchpin of our relevance, and the linchpin being a person or thing that is vital to an enterprise or an organization. And the literal meaning of linchpin is a pin that goes through an axle that holds the wheel on the axle, River. So this holds the wheel on our hunting knowledge of the North American model of wildlife conservation, which has been called an act of American genius. Wasn't replicated. Yeah. And it's unreplicatable. That's what they say. That's what Shane Mahoney said. He said, this is unreplicatable because in a lot of times if something's really successful in one place, like in a country, they'll try to take it to another place and try to see if it works. And because of the unique characteristics of this country, one being all the public land that we have, about 40% of North America's public land. And number two, armed citizenry. Number three, kind of a national approval, a historic national approval of hunting, which really is essential. I mean, so many of the patriarchs of this country were hunters and were endeared patriarchs. I mean, like most people in this country, if you said Daniel Boone, thumbs up or thumbs down, they would say thumbs up. Davy Crockett, thumbs up or thumbs down? Thumbs up. What do you know about Davy Crockett? He killed a bear when he was only 3. Davy Crockett. They would understand him as a hunter. I got just a small chuckle out of that song. Because, what would people think of when they thought of Davy Crockett? They'd think of hunting. What do they think of when they think of Daniel Boone? They'd think of hunting. Some of these hunters. Can y'all think of any others? River can't. No. Kolby can't either. Come on, man.
Man, I'm drawing a blank.
Just hunters? Can we think of other hunters?
Those two are pretty famous.
Okay, gotcha.
Boone and Crockett.
Yeah.
But there were a lot of other hunters that were nationally known and men that were hunters. But so hey, that's all. Go get this book, and man, I think the more knowledge that we have, and as that knowledge is filtered through the life of a person that cares and that is giving back and is being responsible inside the hunting world and being a positive representation of a modern hunter, I think it's helping, and I think we're moving in the right direction. Yeah, but we're massively. This book in some ways is a little bit depressing because it does talk about the challenges, but hey, we were put here for such a time as this. Yep. So River, what should people do?
Because, you want me to start from the beginning?
Yeah.
Okay, keep the wild places wild because that's where the bears live.